Welcome to Patent Behavior Bytes Coffee Breaks. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PATN, is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local educational agencies to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program teams begin with a general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. So in this behavior bite, we're going to talk about anxiety. So let's start by defining what is anxiety. There is typical anxiety and there could be anxiety that is problematic. So let's first learn what is anxiety. So it can be thought of as worry in response to a situation that may be unfamiliar or daily stressors. It might be how people or students react to situations that they might perceive as stressful or even dangerous. It can also be thought of feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes. It also is a universal experience that can be useful when responding to threats. Anxiety is not always a bad thing. Sometimes a little bit of moderate anxiety can serve in a useful purpose. For example, motivation. When we have things like due dates and we know that something is due, that gives us a little bit of anxiety to work in a positive way and get things done by that due date. So sometimes it can really serve a helpful purpose. But when should we be concerned? We all experience anxiety from time to time. Whether we're starting a new job, it's the first day of school, maybe we have an assignment or a project due. We all experience anxiety about unknown situations. But when should we be concerned about anxiety? Here are a couple things to consider and look for. First, anxiety becomes a concern when it is severe and it interferes with functions of daily life. So some things that we might see when we think about anxiety in the school setting and in children and adolescents, things we may see might be avoidance of anxiety-inducing situations. Things like school, social events might be some examples. Some extreme and persisting fear. Beyond what that typical anxiety of the first day of school looks like, it is very extreme and it continues. Excessive worry over common stressors, things that may cause a little bit of anxiety, such as an assignment that's coming up that's due, but there's excessive worry over that. We may see some physical symptoms, such as panic attacks. So additional physical symptoms that go with that, things like sweating, shaking, or dizziness. We may notice or be concerned whenever the fear is not in proportion of the actual threat. So the fear seems to be at an increased proportion for what really is appropriate for that threat or anxiety-provoking situation. We may see avoidant behaviors, excessive worry, and sometimes things like repeated physical complaints, things that might be hard to see, such as a stomach ache or a headache. Students may ask to go to the school nurse frequently. These may be things that we can see that maybe elevate our concern, and we want to do a little bit more investigation into that. So in the classroom, we may see changes in behavior. So increases or decreases in a child's behavior. The student may be doing something that's unusual or out of the ordinary. Some physical behaviors you might observe: pacing around the classroom, tapping pencils, tapping your fingers on the desk, rocking in your chair, things like wringing hands, biting nails, picking skin. Other things we may see when children are experiencing anxiety in the classroom, just kind of looking around and scanning the classroom frequently. The student may have reluctance to engage in different types of tasks or social interaction. And another sign that may be observable is difficulty concentrating. Students may have difficulty concentrating and focusing on their work. So it's important to know that anxiety can be subtle and it may not always be obvious or an externalizing behavior. So some of the things like these are some look-fors. So we've talked about typical anxiety, which we all experience, a few signs that let us know when to be concerned, and maybe some things that we may see in the classroom or related to the school environment. So let's talk about a few strategies, supports, and interventions to help students prevent feelings of anxiety, of excessive anxiety, and then how to help respond when students are experiencing anxiety. So first, it's important to think about the school environment as a whole, creating an emotionally safe and creating emotional wellness in the school environment is not only important for staff, but also for students. So one resource you can check out from the Pennsylvania Department of Education on the Roadmap series, the Staff and Student Wellness Guide. Again, this not only focuses on the importance of building emotional safety and wellness for students, but also the importance of focusing on staff. So it really emphasizes things like building positive relationships, for example, but that is a great resource to check out. Another resource from the University of Connecticut Collaboratory on School and Child Health is a brief Responding to COVID-19, Simple Strategies Anyone Can Use to Foster an Emotionally Safe School Environment. So when you check out this resource, you can see different kernels from the research and how those are tied to help all kinds of emotionally safe practices to help young children, to help teens and adolescents, things that adults can do that are easy, free, and based in research that can be practiced to help build and foster an emotionally safe school environment. Another thing that we look at the whole school is creating safe, predictable, positive, and consistent school environments. So looking at school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports, or SWPBIS, is really a framework for establishing consistent expectations, positive environments, predictability, which is really important for students who experience anxiety. That consistency, predictability, and a positive school environment help to ease that fear of the unknown. So two resources you can check out are the Pennsylvania Positive Behavior Support Network, PAPBS.org. You can also check out the National Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions it supports at www.pbis.org. But starting with that system, we want to ensure that school systems are emotionally supportive, are safe, consistent, predictable. When we have strong systems, that helps all students. But some strategies as we think about working with individual students who may experience anxiety. So there are some things that we can do to help prevent and reduce anxiety for children. So when children may be experiencing anxiety, we can do a few things like help them decide if their thoughts are realistic. So journaling and helping children keep track of thoughts and replacing those negative thoughts with more adaptive ones, more productive thoughts. So for example, when a child is worrying about an assignment and they are thinking, I'm not ever going to get this done and I'm going to fail the whole course, they can journal those negative thoughts and then alongside that, journal some more adaptive thoughts. It may be a little bit tough to meet this deadline, but if I break up the assignment and work on it 20 minutes each day, I can achieve that goal. That might be an example. Helping children engage in flexible thinking. So we might think of this as a pros and cons list. What's the situation? And they can kind of list out and practice and think about those responses. What are the pros and what are the cons to a situation? And what is the best way to take action? Might be another strategy. Help students practice anxiety-reducing responses for likely situations. So we'll talk a little bit about, what are some ways that children can use more productive responses when there is a situation that causes them anxiety. For example, the Yukon Collaboratory on School and Child Health resource talks about things like nasal breathing. And so practicing some strategies like that in advance that students can use when they are faced for situations that cause them anxiety. So discussing those strategies and even having them practice can be very helpful. And then as adults, we can model adaptive ways of coping. If we aren't in control or aren't able to manage our own anxiety, that can be hard for us to show children how to manage their anxiety. It can raise their anxiety. So what we'd like to be able to do is model adaptive and productive ways of coping. So positive self-talk. I know this assignment's due and it's a lot of work, but if I break it up and work on it 20 minutes each day for 3 days, I'll get it done in time. Those relaxation techniques, muscle relaxation, nasal breathing, what are some other ways? And we can model those and practice those with children. We also want to be able to provide some support. So we have to be able to, it is really difficult to avoid all anxiety in life. And again, sometimes a little bit of anxiety can actually be productive in keeping us safe and keeping us motivated to complete tasks. And we can help children learn to tolerate anxiety. So we want to help offer some support, acknowledge children's feelings, and express optimism. Mindfulness is another practice that can help with anxious behaviors. So taking a few quiet minutes each morning and just being present and listening to music, those kinds of things, just having a short walk in nature, some good mindfulness activities, helping children engage in that positive self-talk rather than focus on all of the negative things that can happen, focus on actions that they can take in a positive way to address the situation. Helping children come up with solutions. Let students focus on what they know and what has worked for them in the past. Sometimes as adults and as helpers, we want to tell children what they should do. Let them be partners in that conversation. Their skills and strategies they already know and what has worked for them in the past. Seek out their ideas and then provide reward or acknowledgement for efforts that children make to engage in solutions that are effective. So as we think about ages of children, some people work with younger students and some with teens and adolescents. Just a few considerations for support. For younger children, they often express anxiety through behavior. So some of those behaviors that we might observe, they may not always verbalize that they're feeling nervous or anxious, but we will see that in those behaviors, scanning the room, rocking in their chair. those kinds of behaviors, difficulty concentrating. They are a little bit more limited just because of their age and understanding what they are experiencing. And sometimes it can be more difficult for them to pinpoint or talk about what's the source of worry. Older children, when we work with teens and adolescents, and older elementary children, are better able to talk about situations because of their age and their experience. They're better able to discuss situations in which they're anxious. They're able to pinpoint that a little bit better. And they're capable of describing their own thinking or their own thought processes. So those are a few considerations for support. When we think about interventions for young children, using strategies that focus on behavior versus thinking is more effective, where for adolescents, teens and adolescents, using strategies such as cognitive behavioral therapy. This may be something that a school social worker, counselor, school psychologist may be trained in, but CBT targets thinking and behavior. And finally, we want to be able to know who are those school-based professionals that we can access and seek out their support whenever children are experiencing significant levels of anxiety and we have concern. Our school counselors are excellent school-based professionals who can provide assistance, as are school psychologists, school nurses. They may see students, as we talked about, some of the signs of anxious behavior may be things like stomach ache, and they're frequently going to the school nurse. A school social worker is highly skilled in providing supports and interventions to students who are experiencing anxiety. And finally, every school should have something like a student assistance program, SAP, or some type of problem-solving team that involves an interdisciplinary team, which may include any of these professionals listed on here, plus administrators, special education teachers, community resources. So accessing school-based professionals or problem-solving teams is another step to go and can be very helpful in supporting students who experience anxiety above typical levels. And just a few references. And remember, this is just a bite of behavior. We'll see you next time.